Season 5 Reloaded is here to stay, and it's the last major update of Warzone before we shift across to Warzone 2. And I'm going to show you the top 5 loadouts to give you the best tactical advantage over your enemies. So moving straight onto the loadouts, let's jump into loadout 1. It's going to be the old favourite, the Amax, and then the MP40. Jumping straight into the attachments for the MP40, we're going to be taking the recoil booster for increased rate of fire, and then looking at the barrel, we're going to be taking the Krausnik 317mm 04B for increased accuracy and recoil control. And now moving over to the optic, mainly take whatever low zoom optic that you like here. But I like the slate reflector as I feel like this gives me the most clarity possible. And then moving over to the stock, we are taking the Krausnik 33M folding for increased sprint to fire speed and increased movement speed. And then looking at the underbarrel, we are taking the Mark 6 skeletal for increased aim down sight speed and movement speed, which are all really important things on an SMG. And now moving over across to the magazine, we are taking the 7.62 Gorenko 45 round mags for increased recoil control, movement speed, aim down sight speed and fire rate. And for the ammunition, we are going to be taking subsonic just to keep you off the minimap when you are shooting to stop other enemies third partying you. Then over to the rear grip, we are taking the fabric grip for increased aim down sight speed, sprint to fire speed and hip fire accuracy. And then lastly onto the perks for the gun, we are taking steady at perk 1 for increased ADS firing move speed so you can stay mobile in those close range fights, hopefully just making yourself a little bit harder to hit. And then over to perk 2, we are taking quick to give you improved sprint speed just to help you get across the map a little bit quicker. Now moving over to the Modern Warfare weapons, and boy do I miss doing loadout videos with just 5 attachments because I'm not listing them out for absolutely ages. We are going to be taking on the muzzle, the monolithic suppressor for increased sound suppression and damage range. And then over to the barrel, we are taking the XRK Zodiac for increased damage range, bullet velocity and recoil control. Really important, that last one, the recoil control on the Amax, because it is quite difficult to control. And then over to the optic, we are taking the VLK 3x zoom, just that extra magnification on this gun, which will really help out. And then over to the underbarrel, we are taking the Commando foregrip for increased recoil control and aiming stability. And then over to the magazine, the last attachment, we are taking the 45 round mags for just a larger magazine, just to help you out with those more than one person engagements. And then over to the perks, we are taking Serpentine, Overkill and Amped. You can take Combat Scout if you are on console as it helps you ping your enemies. But personally, I'm on PC and I've got that bound to where my left thumb is, so it's dead easy for me. For your lethal, you want to be taking Semtex. And then tactical, I still really like Snapshot Grenade. I know that it's gone a little bit out of favour. I know a lot of people are using stim shots. So use either of the two and you'll probably be pretty set. And heartbeat sensors are okay as well. Now moving over to the second loadout, we are going to be taking the Marco SMG and then the Black Ops favourite, the XM4. So moving over to the Marco, we are going to be taking the recoil booster yet again for increased rate of fire. Again, that's just a really popular attachment choice on the Vanguard weapons. And then for the barrel, we are going to be taking the Perfetto Lesto 355mm for increased aim down sight speed, movement speed, aim walking movement speed and sprint to fire speed. Again, all really important areas on an SMG. Then over to the optic, we are taking the slate reflector. Again, that's my favourite low zoom optic. You can just take like the Nidar Model 47. Now over to the stock, we are taking the Imerito FR for increased initial fire and recoil control, recoil recovery, aim down sight speed and movement speed. And then over to the underbarrel, yes, again, another Vanguard SMG that we are taking the Mark 6 skeletal. That helps out with your aim down sight speed and movement speed. And then over to the magazine, we're taking the 8mm Nambu 64 round drum for increased hip fire accuracy, recoil control and magazine size. And then looking at the ammunition, we are taking hollow point for limb damage. Again, this gun can be quite useful hip firing, so limb damage is really useful here. And then over to the rear grip, we are taking the taped grip for increased aiming stability, movement speed, weapon swap speed, quickness and sprint to fire speed. All really important areas on an SMG, especially the weapon swap quickness, because it helps you just get to your sort of primary weapon a little bit quicker. And now over to the perks. For perk 1, we are taking Frenzy. Now this is a really great perk on SMGs as it's basically a replacement for Quick Fix, as it just gives you that initial health regen after you've killed someone. And then over to perk 2, we are taking Quick for the additional sprint speed. Now let's move over to the XM4, another weapon that we're not looking at taking 10 different attachments, so this one will be fairly quick. Looking at the muzzle, we are taking the agency suppressor for increased sound suppression, vertical recoil control, bullet velocity, and effective damage range. And then over to the barrel, we are taking the 13.5-inch task force barrel for bullet velocity, recoil control, and effective damage range. And then over to the optic, we are taking the axial arms 3x zoom, again just to make it easier to fight at ranges. And for the underbarrel, we are taking the field agent grip, as this helps out with both vertical and horizontal recoil control. And then lastly, onto the magazine, we are taking the Stanag 60 round mag. This just gives you extra ammo capacity. And again, lethal with Semtex and then tactical between the ones we discussed earlier. And then moving over to the third loadout, we are taking the Cooper carbine and then the Type 100. We are taking the recoil booster, again for that increased rate of fire. And then for the barrel, we are taking the Warubachi 134mm rapid barrel for increased fire rate and damage range. And then over to the optic, the slate reflector. Again, you can just choose any low zoom optic that you like. Then over to the stock, the Warubachi grip folding for increased aim walking movement speed, aim walking steadiness, and just initial fire and recoil control as well. And then over to the underbarrel, the M1930 strife angled for increased horizontal recoil control without negatively impacting too much elsewhere. And then over to the magazine, we are taking the .3 Russian short 36 round mags, as this gives you extra damage range, extra damage, bullet penetration, and bullet velocity. Yes, the recoil control is not as great and the fire rate isn't as great, but this is going to absolutely shred your enemies as long as you're on target. However, it is really worth noting that if you're playing quads, probably not going to be the SMG for you, just because the magazine size just isn't enough, and you don't want to be taking this because it's just not as good as this one. This is great for solos, maybe duos, but definitely not trios or quads. Then over to the ammunition, we are taking subsonic to stop you just pinging up on the minimap again, so a really useful attachment here. And then over to the rear grip, we are taking the taped grip again. This is to help out with aiming stability, movement speed, weapon swap quickness, again just helping you get to your primary weapon a little bit easier, and then increased sprint to fire speed as well. Over lastly to the perks, we are taking acrobatic for movement speed and sprinting move speed increased as well, just making you really fly around the map with this weapon. And then to top it off, we're going to add quick as well, just to give you extra sprint speed. And now looking over to the Cooper carbine, which has literally recently just been buffed in this latest update, as really viable and manageable on the recoil again. So let's jump straight into that. For the muzzle, we are going to be taking the MX silencer for sound suppression, horizontal and vertical recoil control, and increased damage range too. And then over to the barrel, we are taking the 22-inch Cooper custom, again making your shots really easy to control by increasing the recoil control, increasing the fire rate as well, and then just damage range as well, which is all really useful. And then over to the optic. Now, something you really need to be taking off all of your loadouts so far, guys, is the 3 to 6 times zoom. They've heavily nerfed the aim down sight speed to the point where it's just going to be absolutely useless going forwards. You're going to be spending far too long at aiming down sight, so you either want to be taking the G16 2.5 times zoom if you're okay with that little bit lower zoom, or take the 3.5 times rifle scope. Again, this is going to give you that, or just slightly more than a 3 times zoom, so if you are wanting those longer range fights, then this is going to be quite useful. Pick between the two of them. And now over to the stock, we are taking the Cooper 45 RS. Now this gives you initial fire and recoil control, aim down sight speed, and recoil recovery. And then for the underbarrel, we are taking the Carver foregrip. This gives you better vertical recoil control. You don't really get too much horizontal on this gun, so we are just focusing on the vertical here. Then hip fire accuracy, I mean, it's not going to go amiss. And then over to the magazine, we are taking the 9mm 60 round drums for increased rate of fire, recoil control, and aim down sight speed, and that larger magazine. But this gun does rinse through ammo, so you definitely need the larger magazines here. And then for the ammunition, we are taking the compressed rounds. This is gonna make the gun really quick in terms of killing your enemies, and it'll give you a faster fire rate. Over to the rear grip, we're taking the pine tar grip if you couldn't guess, added recoil control and hip fire accuracy. And then for the perks, perk 1, we are going to be taking hard scoped. You know, the longer you're aiming down sight, the more recoil control you're going to get. And then over to perk 2, we are taking fully loaded for max starting ammo. And now over to perk 3. Now this is actually probably the best loadout, guys. The MP40 is definitely the #1 SMG at the moment. Then we're also going to be taking the STG, but the loadout from the last one that I've showed you has definitely changed a little bit, so make sure you stick around for that. For the MP40 attachments, we already ran through those, so I'm only going to run through all of these attachments really quick. But the recoil booster, Krausnik 317mm 04B, the slate reflector, the Krausnik 33mm holding for the stock, the underbarrel, we're going to be taking the Mark 6 skeletal, the magazine, we are taking the 7.62 Gorenko 45 round mags, ammunition, subsonic, rear grip, fabric grip, and then for perk 1, we're taking steady, and perk 2, quick. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the best assault rifle in Warzone, we're going to be taking the STG. Now, for the attachments here, we want to be taking the Amax silencer for increased sound suppression, vertical and horizontal recoil control, as well as damage range increased. And then for the barrel, we're taking the VDD 760-05B for increased recoil control. In fact, it's drastically increases, definitely the best barrel possible. Increased damage range and reduced gun and sway and bob, and then increased bullet velocity as well. And then for the optic, the G16 2.5 times zoom. Again, you could swap this out with the 3.5 times. I don't like the slate reflector ones because I often find I'm just constantly aiming down the slate reflector when I don't want to be. Again, just don't be taking the 3 to 6 times zoom going forwards. You want to be taking the 2.5 times zoom or the base 3.5 times zoom scopes. And over to the stock, we are taking the VDD 34S weighted for increased accuracy, flinch resistance, recoil control, and aiming stability. And then over to the underbarrel, we are taking the M1941 hand stop. Yes, previously I have been suggesting to take the bipod on a lot of things, but things have been nerfed and buffed, so we're back to the hand stop as the #1 assault rifle attachment on the underbarrel. Then over to the magazine, we are taking the 7.62 Gorenko 50 round mags. Yes, this does make you burn through ammo a little bit more, but it's going to give you increased rate of fire, movement speed, and aim down sight speed, and just better recoil control as well. Yes, the damage is slightly less, but you make up for it with the rate of fire. And then over to the ammunition, we're taking lengthened for increased bullet velocity, and then for the rear grip, the hatched grip for increased recoil control and flinch resistance. And then for perk 1, sleight of hand, or you can take focus if you find your flinch is a bit too bad. Vital, your recoil control is just all over the place, so don't bother with it. And then for perk 2, we are taking fully loaded as it gives you max starting ammo. And now over to the 5th loadout. It is a sniper loadout, guys. Just for those of you that do fancy a bit of sniping, this is the best sniper loadout at the moment. We are taking the Nikita AVT. So we're taking the Mercury silencer for the muzzle, which is going to give you sound suppression, horizontal recoil control, and bullet velocity. And then over to the barrel, we are taking the Kovalevskaya 5.46mm sniper, which this is going to give you bullet velocity, damage range, and recoil control. And then over to the optic. Personally, for a sniper support, I don't like taking the slate reflector. I just fancy that little bit extra zoom, which is why you can see me taking the 1.5 times zoom here. But again, any low zoom optic will do one here. Even iron sights if you really fancy it. Over to the stock, we are taking the Zach padded for increased movement speed, sprint to fire speed, aim walking movement speed, and aim down sight speed. And then over to the underbarrel, we are taking the M1930 strife angled for increased horizontal recoil control. Over to the magazine, we are taking the 6.5 Sakura 60 round drums for a larger magazine size, increased recoil control, and hip fire accuracy. On the ammunition, we're taking the bullet velocity attachment, so lengthened. And then for rear grip, we're taking taped grip for increased aiming stability, movement speed, weapon swap quickness, which is great for snipers, by the way, because they're traditionally very slow. And then increased sprint to fire speed as well. For perk 1, we are taking perfectionist for increased recoil control. And then perk 2, we're taking fully loaded just to give you that extra there. It's worth noting that this isn't the perfect no recoil build, but that's not what you want with a sniper support. You want something that's going to help you in that mid to close range, that's going to be able to cope with the SMGs up close. Equally, can give you something as a bit of a mid ground. You can quickly swap out from your sniper and pull an assault rifle out of them and get on quite well, basically. And then over to the sniper, we are taking 3-line rifle. And then for these attachments, we're taking the Mercury silencer for increased sound suppression, horizontal recoil control, and bullet velocity. And then for the barrel, we are taking the Empress 514mm F01 for increased aim down sight speed, improved sprint to fire speed, bullet velocity, and no damage drop off. And then the optic, it's quite simply put, you don't need anything here, and this is no longer really that viable, so just don't take anything here as you don't need the ADS speed nerf. And then over to the stock, we are taking the Zach Custom MZ for initial firing recoil control, which doesn't really matter on this gun. Ultimately, we're taking it for the aim down sight speed here, just to allow you aiming at your enemies that little bit quicker. And then over to the underbarrel, we are taking the Mark 6 skeletal for increased aim down sight speed. The movement speed as well is great, but aim down sight speed is really where it's at with snipers. And then for the magazine, we are taking the 20 round mags for increased bullet velocity and range, damage, bullet penetration, and reload quickness. So all in all, a great attachment. And then over to the ammunition type, we are taking bullet velocity 1, so lengthened. Bullet velocity is great on a sniper for those long range shots, which is precisely why you're taking a sniper rifle. And then for the rear grip, we are taking the lever grip for increased aim down sight speed, aiming stability, and aim walking movement speed. And then for perk 1, we are taking silent focus. Here's a tip, guys, don't take shrouded, it's not worth it. This scope, glint, concealment, only very small amount of time that is literally not notable. And then for perk 2, we are taking on hand as it gives you extra aim down sight speed, which is great on a sniper. Well guys, look, thanks for watching the video. If you want to see all the top loadouts going forward in both Warzone and Warzone 2, including Modern Warfare 2 when it comes out, then feel free to hit the subscribe button and the like button. And if you want to see the top 20 29 tips to become a better Warzone player, then subscribe away and click on the video on screen now. Fucking rat.